Illustrations by Pete.
Hello everyone, welcome to another video. The world of art can be a little bit confusing. You want to get started, you don't know what medium to start with or how to use it. Here's my advice on what to get first. Let's get into it. So the first thing I would do is get some graphite. Here are some graphite pencils that I have. They range in hardness from 4H all the way over to a 9XXB. So the H is going to be your hard pencil, and sometimes I really like these because they show up very light. So you can sketch something very lightly, and I'll show you that here in a second. But they can scratch the paper. So you have to be very careful with these. Then when you go to a B, that stands for bold, I believe, I think. I'm not sure. That's what I was always told it was. But anyway, that is a softer pencil. When you get to the B's, softer. Now, you will hear some artists tell you that an artist should never work with a pencil, any of the H or HBs or anything like that. They should work from B up. That is not true. I use H's, and I use actually a 4H is probably my most common H pencil that I use. Here's what I recommend. You want to get something a little bit light that you know will not leave heavy marks. So you might want an H or an HB pencil, or you could even pick a B pencil as your hardest pencil. And that's okay if that's what you want to do. Now here's something else you got to pay attention to. This is a Faber-Castell HB. I don't know if you can see that, but that lead, you see how small it is compared to this Derwent sketching pencil, which has a much bigger lead here. And that just means you can turn it on the side and get wider strokes with it. That's all that is. So let's say the hardest pencil that you want to have is going to be an HB pencil. So I'm going to pull out this Derwent sketching pencil here. I'm going to stick it to the side for a moment. Now I want you to get a mid-range pencil. So let's say your mid-range is going to be about a 2B or a 3B. These general layout pencils, oh, this is Prismacolor Ebony. Okay, the Prismacolor Ebony, the general layout pencils, they're somewhere, they call them extra black, but they're somewhere around a 3B. They're pretty dark. Okay, so if you did get that, let's say we're going to grab that. We're going to grab that and then call that our darker pencil. Somewhere around a 2B to 4B range is going to be your mid. Then you want to get a dark color. Now, if you want a dark pencil, here's what I would recommend. You can either use, well, they don't have these anymore. So Staedtler Mars Lumograph, they still make these pencils, but they don't make them this way anymore. The 7B and the 8B used to have carbon in them. Why is that important? Because when you get to those heavier pencils, or they say the darker pencils, they will sometimes reflect light a lot more. So if you're taking a picture or you're filming or whatever you're doing with this, sometimes you'll and I'll show you that too. I'll show you that. Let me see. I'll pull a I'll pull a 6B and show you how dark that can get next to a 7B or an 8B of the Mars Lumograph. Now, what the Staedtler does have is they have a Mars Black, I think it's called, the black graphite line, and those, the 7B and the 8B, I believe all of them have a little bit of carbon in them, but the other ones are pretty light. You really can't tell. I believe the 7B and the 8B, you can really tell they get very dark, and that's because they're this formula where they have the carbon in them. You can also use the Kimberly 9XXB pencil. This is very dark, and again, there's carbon in it, which is why. So it does feel chalky. It's not as smooth as graphite. I'll grab one of them. One of the other options you have, if you've ever seen Mark Crilly's channel, he uses a Prismacolor black, or any black colored pencil really you can use to get your darkest value here, and that just creates a little bit more contrast. So you have a light, a mid-tone, and a dark, and I would highly recommend that you get those at least. Okay, so when you take an HB pencil and you see that it's gray. It's very obviously a very light shade of gray. The layout pencil is about a 3B, And you can see that that's fairly dark. A lot darker than the HB. This is a Tombow 6B, and it's even softer. As a matter of fact, one of the telltale signs that it's a softer pencil is that you'll see less of the paper coming through. So that white of that paper that came through on this one, it's a lot softer, so it fills in that tooth of that paper. Now we have the 9XXB, and you'll see that is, yeah, it's a little bit okay. Now they also, you have to sharpen them a lot more because that point just wears out real quick. And here is a Prismacolor black. There's almost as much dust coming off of it. As a matter of fact, there is more dust coming off of it than the carbon pencil. Now pencils are fun. I hate sketching with pencil because I don't like the mess that it makes. You have some alternatives if you want to. You can get colored pencils and use a light gray colored pencil, a medium gray colored pencil, and then a black colored pencil. You can do that, and I would like to do that because this gets pretty messy. But colored pencils get messy also. They also come off on the other pages. So if I close this book, it's going to, all this graphite, all the carbon, some of the colored pencil will start to rub off onto the other page, and I'm not a big fan of that. But here's something I want to show you even more. So you can see, okay, see the shine on these three, but you don't see the shine here, or at least if you do, it's very, very little compared to the other ones. So if you're photographing your work and you wanted to put this somewhere, these are going to reflect a lot. Just for comparison, here's another Faber-Castell. This is a warm gray. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's not reflecting as much. It does reflect a little bit. Let me put it right next to this and see if you can see it. Okay, you can clearly see this, and this have that reflection, and that light gray doesn't. So you may opt to do that. Another thing you can do with graphite pencils is get a water-soluble graphite pencil. So then, this is an HB. So it's going to be a light gray. It will be reflective until you add some water to it, and then it'll almost like it turns into paint. And these are very unique. I love water soluble graphite for sketching because once you wet it, it no longer picks up onto the other page. So this is my pick for graphite, but I understand you're not going to always want to do this. So my preference is to pick some gray pencils that will fit in the colors. That way I can get the values the same way. Alright, so one other thing I want to show you is how they would work. So if you're shading in an area, let's say it's just something very, very simple, and you're shading in a shape, and you want to see where the light, you want to just add some 3D to it, some three-dimensionality to it. Is that a word? Is three-dimensionality a thing? Let me shut off this light. There's still a lot of shine on here, I apologize, but now if you take your 3B or your 2B or however you want to do that, you can then start to add in a little bit of texture with that, and add maybe a little bit of shadow to one side. Okay? And you say, well, yeah, that's pretty good, but I want to add a little bit darker. I want it to give it some more dimension. you just come in here with your darkest and just blend that right in to the darkest part. So now you've created a three-tone drawing. You have your light, your mid-tone, and your dark, and you did it while you were sketching. And these are easy. You just take them out with you wherever you go and just do light sketching work. And that's why it doesn't matter if you are using pen or if you're using marker or anything else. It's fun just to have some pencils with you. It's beneficial so that you can sketch and just create form. One of the things I like to do with pencil is just kind of get a feeling of a shape. So that's all I'm doing, is getting a feeling for that shape. And then this, by the way, is a blueberry with the stem still on it, because every time I buy blueberries, which I absolutely love, they all have these little stems sticking out of them, and none of the blueberries on the top of the package do, but this one does, because that's the one that I grab. And then as you give it some shape, and you just doing this in your book, you're sketching flowers, you're sketching trees, whatever you're doing, and you're just giving it some, you're filling in some color here, you're just filling in some texture here, and then you go in with your next one. It's a little darker up here, maybe there's a little bit more shadow on this side. Maybe some of that light hits up there and you don't see much of a shadow on that part of it. Then you may go back in with your black pencil and get some real shadow. And maybe you're putting a shadow on the ground and you want that to be nice and dark. Okay, the other thing I would say is to go ahead and get an eraser. Now, because I put colored pencil down, you might think, hey, you can't erase that. But they make these like weird stick little things that you can try and scrub that up on, and it'll erase it. Colored pencil can be erased. It doesn't go all the way away, which is good if you're putting a highlight on something, because you still want to show the form and the shape. These are one of my favorite erasers. These are the dust-free erasers. They are not dust-free, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. See, they just have bigger dust. But that's okay. I still love these. They're nice and soft. Very nice. And of course you have these kneaded erasers. It's the silly putty of erasers. And you can either form it into a point and try and erase something, or what most people do is they just dab it on and pull it off. And it pulls off some of that loose graphite. Or you get a plastic eraser or a gum eraser, however you want to do that. You just do what you want to do with that. Get a couple of them. Erasers aren't that expensive. Get a few erasers, see what you like. Alright, next. Okay, now I would suggest getting two fine liners. Like a 0.1 and a 0.5. Every company has their own ratings. So some will call it, I know Pigma, I don't think it's, yeah, so on the Pigma Micron, a 0.1, it will tell you right on it is a 0.25. I don't know if you can see that, but it says 0.25 there. And so the 01 is actually a 0.25. Different pens are different things, different companies. Sometimes it'll say 0.25, sometimes it'll say 01. Now this is actually a 1.0, so this is a thick multi-liner. This is a 0.5, and it's actually a 0.5. It's not an 05. Just like the Pigma Microns, their 05 is a 0.45 millimeter. So that's what their 5 is. These are really cool too. These are PNs, and PN is kind of like a hard brush tip, but it's a 0.5. The thing is, you can get a little bit more variation with these if that's what you want. So you can get a very, very thin line, very fine line that you almost can't see, or you can get a very thick line by pushing a little bit harder. It's felt at the tip. It doesn't wear out as quick as a felt tip marker does. It lasts quite a long time, and they're good. It's a good one to have. So it's a PN. It's equivalent to, well, I'd say it's close to the Tombow. Yeah, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. Furunosuk. I don't. I'm going to pronounce that wrong. I apologize. But these pens, so they have a hard and a soft brush pen. So this is a hard one, and this one's same thing. You can push hard, or you can relatively light and get a thinner line, and then you can push even harder and get a much thicker line. So these are nice. Now that they also have a soft version of that, and it's harder to get a thinner line, but you can get an even fatter line than that, and it's a little bit easier to fill in. So if you're going to fill in an area, you can just run that on the side. It fills in a large area quickly. Whereas if you're trying to do that with this one here and trying to fill in a space, it takes a very long time to fill in that space. So that's why I say to get two, because you have one for very small lines, very fine lines, one for thicker lines. Sometimes you'll use this just like a pencil and kind of sketch something, sketch a shape, and then you'll go back in with the thicker and kind of just solidify that. Or if you're drawing something like a little leaf or something like that, when you're done with the drawing, a lot of people like to just go on the outside of the drawing and make it thicker, but leave the details small. You can also do that where, let's say this is not a leaf, you did draw something with a very thick line, you can put very, very fine shadow in there with a very fine liner. You can definitely add to your graphite drawings with these. Let me show you. Okay, so here's a drawing that I did. I'm gonna get closer on this, but this was done with the multiple different graphite. So the Derwent sketching with a wash, you'll say light wash, medium wash, and dark wash, and then the medium wash is a 4B and the dark wash is an 8B. Those go very dark, and I used all of those in here, but then I went back, and if you can see over here, very, very, very fine lines with a fine liner. I used a 0.05 fine liner to put these very, very fine lines in here. Now you have to be careful because I don't know if you can even see that tip on there, but it's very, very small. So people like me who are very heavy-handed have to be very careful, hold the pen back a little bit, and just use very small strokes, because otherwise you can break off that tip, you can damage the tip. It's just a piece of felt is all it is. So you don't want to do that. But you can do something like this, and again, of course, I added water to this and then went back over with other values and made it darker. But the thing that really added the contrast in the shadow area was the fine liner on top of the graphite. Now you have your graphite, you have your fine liners, sketching, drawing, inking, creating shadow, form, shape. And now pick one other thing. It could be anything that add color. It can be colored pencil. It can be water-soluble colored pencil, watercolor, marker, acrylic, whatever it is you want to do to add color. So you have three mediums. You have your graphite, you have your ink, you have your color, whatever that other medium is. Now, the reason I say is to have three is because when you're first getting started, you want to keep up the curiosity and the experimental part of the excitement when you're first getting started with art. You want to still practice your fundamentals, your basic skills that come along, form, shape, texture, value, all of that stuff. But you want to make sure that you can experiment a little bit. One of those ways you can do that is by using color. Okay, so I have three different shapes here. It's okay that they're all a little bit different, but I started to fill in a little bit of shading with the ink itself. Okay, so we're gonna say that this is a bluish stone. So I'm going to add a little bit of color there. Now what I want to do is add just a little bit more color for the shadow. So I'm going to come back into here and add a little bit more color for the shadow. That's one way to do it. You can also pick another color and add a second color in here that points out the shadow a little bit more. So you practice your shading, practice your color. You can mix things up. Watercolor is really fun. Okay, so this is also good. I'm going to use some colored pencil, and I'm just going to go ahead, and you can use circular motions colored pencil. You can use short strokes with colored pencil. A lot of people use circular motions. Now, this is just giving you an idea. Okay, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you a couple of different things you can do in order to create the texture, in order to add to the color, add to your curiosity, add to what you're doing, make it a little bit more enjoyable for you. And even if you're doing abstract art, a lot of people think that abstract art is just slapping color on a page. Nope, even if you're an abstract artist, you're still planning things. You're still planning patterns and shapes and textures. And you can do that with a pencil and some ink and some colored pencils or some watercolor and plan it out. Okay? So there's the first layer. Now, of course, color pencils, you want to do layer after layer after layer. You can blend it out with odorous mineral spirits. You can burnish it out by just pushing a lot harder. But now I'm going to use another color, come in here, and add to the shadow. Now here's one of my favorite things to use. These are graphitin pencils. You do not need to be careful with them. You can use these as regular colored pencils, and this may be a good medium for that, is because you can use them as regular colored pencils if you want to, or you can use them as the water-soluble medium and get some really nice colors. The Derwent Graphitin are definitely some of my favorite pencils. I have been using them for a very, very long time and really liked them, probably since almost the time when they came out, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe not. Maybe they were out and I just stumbled upon them, and now I use them, but I use them a lot. So I'm going to add, now on this one, I'm just going to add a darker brown color to it. And if I was going to use this just like a colored pencil, then that would be it. This also had a little bit of cross hatching in it, or as I like to call it, hashtagging. The cool thing about this is once you do that, you can then go over and just add a little bit of water and blend it out a little bit. And you want to go from lighter to darker when you do that. And there you go, and you can even add a little shadow if you want to add a shadow to it. Because it's water soluble, it will, you could drag the color around a little bit. Okay, so there's just some examples of what you can use. If you want to use marker, you can use marker. Use whatever you want to use on here. But as long as you have your basics, you have your graphite, you have your ink, you have your color, whatever the thing is that you're using for color, that's a great way to start art. The only other thing you need to do is to find a good sketchbook. Now, if you do not have a whole lot of money, I know I'm tearing these out. Don't worry, I'm still using these. I'm not throwing them away. I'm going to use the rest of the space. I'm going to use it for swatching and things like that when I'm doing other art. So this book here, there's a lot of pages in here. It's a very inexpensive book. You can probably pick one of these up for, I don't know, under $10. Let's put it that way. Under $10. Even if you go into Michael's and you use your code on the app, you can get these for under $10. They're usually on sale. You can find them for $5.99 or something like that. They're very cheap. Amazon has them cheap, wherever you get them. And they're 7x10. It's a decent size. It's good to take with you to sketch around because it's a very hard cardboard cover, so you can fold it back on itself. It has its own support. Like I said, very cheap. 98-pound paper isn't bad. You saw I put some water media on there. It buckles a little bit. It's just a sketchbook. And that's the point that I wanted to make is when you first start out, you want to get into art. How do you do that? You get those supplies and then you start with a sketchbook. The sketchbook is very important because you don't want to buy a bunch of expensive paper that you're going to use a sheet at a time. I did that when I first started, and it was terrible because I'm pulling out this $3 sheet of paper that I've got to put something on. I don't want to sketch on it. I want to put something finished on it. So you put a lot of pressure on yourself to make something nice on that expensive paper. I'm not saying don't use expensive paper. As a matter of fact, I'm a firm believer of using the best you can afford, but I'm saying start in a sketchbook. This right now is my favorite sketchbook. It's 5x8. It's about $25 on Amazon in the US. I think it's an 8x10, somewhere around there, is $35, but the paper is, the quality is second to none. This is 100% cotton, so not only can I play with the color on here, but I can add layer after layer after layer, and it handles it just fine. It handles all the erasing, it handles all the sketching part of it, it handles all of it. That's what you want. If you have the money to use this, then use it. If you don't, there's nothing wrong with getting a book like this and sketching and learning your form, your shapes, your textures. The color, you'll use a little bit of color. If you add layer on top of layer on top of layer, I just did 2 in the last example, and it was fine. But if I were to keep going, let it dry, put another layer, let it dry, put another layer, and I did that, I'd probably end up tearing right through this paper. It would start to beat up and tear. Also, the watercolor will act different on cellulose paper than it will on cotton paper. If you are trying to be a watercolorist, I would spend the extra couple of dollars and use the 100% cotton paper, because that's how you're going to be able to learn that medium properly. So again, my advice, get a decent sketchbook. That's very important. Couple grades of pencils from maybe a little bit lighter shade, a mid shade, and then a dark shade. Get yourself 2 or 3 multi-liners, something you can ink with, something that has a thicker line and something that has a much thinner line, so you can experiment with putting in details and hatch marks and that kind of stuff. And then get yourself some color, something you can experiment with for color. That's really all you need to get started with art. This stuff you can take with you anywhere you go. This is a little bit more difficult, but you can still take it with you. These water pens are great because they have the water in there. You can just use a towel and just blot out the color and go into the next well. You don't contaminate your wells. And if you have a couple of these with you, you're not going to run out of water in a single sketch, or at least you shouldn't. Sometimes you will, but if you have a few of these with you, you really won't. And that's my advice. That's everything I have to share with you right now. Okay, that brings us to the end of the video. There's a few more videos, I think somewhere over here, popping up on the screen in case you want to view those. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.